There we go. And now I'm happy to hand it over to Lynde Rosario. Thanks, Lynde.
Thank you, Julia. Hi, everybody. Welcome. We begin, as always, by acknowledging that the Playwright Center is on the traditional land of the Dakota people and the Anishinaabe people. We offer our gratitude for the work of Native and Indigenous activists, past, present, and future, who steward the land and challenge us to be partners rather than owners of it. Thank you all for being with us here today. My name is Lynde Rosario. I use she, her, hers pronouns, and I am the Director of Fellowship Programs at the Playwright Center and a dramaturg. With me today is Idris Goodwin. Idris, if you would, come on camera and unmute to introduce yourself to our audience.
Hello, audience, and hello, Lynde. How are you? Hello, Julia V. I'm Idris Goodwin, he, him, his, and I am beaming in today from Colorado Springs, Colorado, the unceded territory of the Ute and Cheyenne peoples, alive and still very much flourishing in Colorado Springs.
Thank you, Idris. Well, we're so.
Should I tell my zodiac sign?
Anything you want to share?
Libra.
Me too. 2 Libras here with you today, y'all.
Libra mob.
That's right.
Very balanced conversation.
Let's hope we find balance in our conversation today. Quick reminder for all of you PWC fans out there that next month is our Play Labs Festival, featuring new work from Frankie Gonzalez, Aradine Knox, Andrew Rosendorf, and this year's cohort of brilliant playwriting fellows. Tickets are free and available on our website now, and they're already going fast, so get yours today. But enough of what's coming up. What is here in front of us today? The event itself, For Love of Theater, and this event is hosted in partnership with the Dramatists Guild Foundation as part of the Roe Green Visiting Voices program. We are so grateful for this partnership with Dramatists Guild Foundation, and you can find more information about them at dgf.org. Definitely check out Dramatists Guild for all of you. They have great resources.
Shout out to Dramatists Guild.
Thank you. All right, here we are. With our positivity, with our love of theater. Idris Goodwin came to me and said, I want to talk about things I love about theater and making theater in the world today. And so we each brought to the conversation today our top 5 things that we love about theater. I'm going to start us off with my number 5, and we'll go back and forth. So we end with you, Idris, with your number 1 thing you love about theater. After our conversation, we'll leave some time at the end for questions, but let's launch right in. I'm so excited to talk about what I love about theater.
Beautiful.
My number 5 thing that I love about theater, I have playfully titled New Day, New Work. And that to me signifies no 2 days are identical in theater. No show that you see on any given day in the run will ever be the same as the show it was the night before. I mean, you can try to build routine in theater, but for me, as someone who's worked in it most of my life, it never ever felt like a rut. There's something about dipping into other people's imaginations every single day when I open new plays and new work to read for me as a dramaturg, that I can never actually predict how any one day or any one piece of work or anything I do will affect the rest of my day or anyone around me. And that's exciting. I never have to worry about a boring life in theater. So that's it's my number 5. What, Idris, what's your number 5 thing you love about theater?
Well, here's how I'm going to do mine, actually, because these are not in any order of rank. But what I'm going to do is I'm gonna pick mine based on things you said and like piggyback, because like what you just got at is one of mine as well, which is that like a play. I mean, and it's funny because as I was putting this together, like obviously as a playwright and someone who, reps playwright mob pretty hardcore, there's things I love about plays and then there's things I love about theater. And I'm like, are they the same thing? Like meaning, but that sort of unanswerable question, is a theater a venue or is it a practice? Is it a ritual or is it, like what is it? It's like yes to all of it. It's just reminding me like, theater is it's a living thing, and I think, all art exists to reflect, but also to human beings apply meaning to it, right? Like, so like a novel is useless unless someone's reading it, right? But I think more than any other art form, going on the record here, I think theater in and of itself, excuse me, is the most reliant on multiple people to engage with it. One could read a play alone, but it's a completely different experience when a group of people get together to read it at the same time versus if a group of people got together to read a novel and passed off paragraphs, meaning that they're not interact. It's like they're trading off, but like a play in and of itself can be read by a group of friends at a table, or someone can dump $300,000, $500,000 into it and produce it, right? Or a community group can put it together for $500, you know, and it's all the production values might be better in one place, but the text is the text, meaning like the play is still going to say what it's saying, you know, and I like that about theater / plays in and of themselves. Now I understand. Anyway, I'll stop there.
Oh no, please don't feel any urgency to stop. We love hearing you in conversation. But actually, everything you said just leads into my number 4. I will stick with my structure. I love structure.
Like it. Let's go.
Which I have titled Introductions and Reintroductions. And something you just said really sparked for me about meeting new people and having theater itself being this living thing. And we are all living things while creating theater. And so I don't think we can ever take our own humanity or human-centeredness out of the way we work. But I have found myself constantly introducing and reintroducing myself to people in new ways. For example, I work with a lot of what I consider multi-hyphenate artists who are producers and directors and actors and playwrights. And all of those things do not come to us as compartmentalized human beings, but as full human beings. And so it's exciting for me to think about the different ways we reintroduce ourselves to each other in different mediums. I've worked with one person as a playwright and then again as an actor, and it was just such an incredibly different experience to see them embody totally different disciplines and roles. And I have found a lot of permission from the world of theater to reinvent self and to consider artists as a regeneration of self. And what does each new collaboration show me about myself and about the artists I work with? And something about this like living thing and how we apply meaning really struck me when you were talking. But yeah, introductions and reintroductions, that sparks the poetry.
Yeah, allow us to reintroduce ourselves. Well, since you're talking about multi-hyphenate artists, that brings me to my number 4, which is one of the things I love about theater is the artist Brian Quijada. Shout out Brian Quijada. He is someone who theater sort of produced in a way that, you know, he's the youngest of 4 brothers. His older brother Marvin, shout out Marvin Quijada, is a really great theater artist, and Brian, being the youngest, really looked up to his older brother and started, you know, just at a very young age was like in shows and you know, doing a lot of musical theater, and was going to school to become a teacher. And he and I met at the University of Iowa, and I heard him beatboxing, and I was like, oh, I'm writing this play right now, and I need a character who could beatbox. So got him in this play. This play was my show, How We Got On. Flash forward, it was in the Humana Festival in 2012. Brian was in it. The industry came and saw Brian, and now Brian has like 5, you know, a bunch of seasons got announced today, and like Brian's in like a bunch of them. And so it's just been a thrill to kind of have a front row seat to his sort of genesis. But yeah, to me, he just kind of represents all the things that I guess what I like about theater, what I love about theater is that there's room in it for all different kinds of artistic expressions, you know, and Brian plays music and he loops and he's funny and he can sing and all this, and it's like he can be all those things, you know, he's writing and, you know, he can be all those things. And so, yeah, I Love Brian Chiata.
Ah, yes. Shout out all the artists you love here. Anytime you feel a desire, that's such a beautiful gift to the world. And if any of you out there don't know Brian Chiata, please look that person up. You're going to want to know them. Great. I'll move us along to my number 3 thing I love about theater, which is all about perspective. For me, theater has always found a way of reframing what I thought I knew. And the things that I came in thinking would be one way have always been shown to me to be another way. And to me, that's sort of that eye opener, that aha moment that shows you something new, something you hadn't considered before. And great pieces of theater, not necessarily even ones I've worked on, but ones that I've observed and I've been witness to, have all sort of shared knowledge and information with me in a way that creates learning and understanding of something that, even if it challenges something, a notion I walked in with, feels like I can't shake that. There are moments in my career, in my life, where a piece of theater has drastically shifted my perspective in a way that no other real thing ever has. And not only did I sense it in myself, but as an audience member, I sensed it was shared. We had a shared experience of shifted perspective in a way that felt so powerful. I have never had another entity, element of this world other than theater, do something en masse in that way, in my presence.
Yeah, real spill. Yeah, that to be flipped inside out by a night in the theater is a pretty remarkable experience. And there's few things kind of like that. And so with that, my number 3, I'm gonna toss out, I love the staged reading. And many of my experiences where I was turned inside out as a professor, as a theater goer, and has been just hearing people just grab the text and a music stand and what I'm saying, just like, let's go. Theater, despite certain efforts sometimes by certain places and folks, it's a humble form, and it should remain a humble form. And a lot of times when you see Hollywood actors who want to like go do some theater, it's because it's a measure of, you can't fake it. Like it's like, can you run? It's like sports. It's like, once the whistle blows, like the game is on. The shot goes in or it doesn't, and it's a humble form. And I think at its best, it reminds us of that. And at this moment in time too, where we find ourselves as an industry, I think we're definitely being humbled. And I think a lot of us that are sticking through it and weathering the slings and arrows are continuously humbled. But we remain, because I think there's a sense and an understanding that, it's a humble form. It's an ancient, humble necessity of human experience.
I completely agree.
I deviated from stage. I think maybe, no, it's the same thing. I'm saying part of what I love about the staged reading is that it's a humble way of presenting work, and a reminder. Boom, done.
Well, if you like the staged reading, I have a playwright center just for you.
Homie.
Literally our bread and butter, right?
I know. Let's go. That's why I love it so much.
Oh, that's wonderful. Great. Let's move along to our number 2. We're creeping up to our number 1 at a rapid pace. So I'm gonna slow us down a bit with a story.
Great. I love
Don't
stories.
we love a story? Well, my number 2 sort of plays into this story, because my number 2 is the suspension of disbelief. And it's a phrase that I learned at a very early age that has fueled so much of my pedagogy and philosophy as not just a theater artist, but a human. And it was about magic moments. And it was about understanding magic is real. And it was about understanding we can't always believe our lying eyes. And it was about recognizing that the things that we thought were impossible could be possible. And I'll share a story. My first Broadway show, I was born in New York, so I would go to Broadway shows once a year. That was sort of our gift from a relative who cared. And I was about 9 years old, and we saw Peter Pan on Broadway. Not to date myself at all, who knows when that show ran. We saw Peter Pan on Broadway. And when they lifted her up to fly across the audience, she spread fairy dust over that section of the audience. I, however, was not seated in that section. I was seated off to the side, which was still a fantastic seat, but my spoiled child self was destroyed, completely devastated that I got no fairy dust that day. And I went home, and the relative who had bought me this ticket found out that this was my experience. And later that week, I received in the mail a letter from Peter Pan, covered, filled to the brim with glitter and fairy dust. And that letter apologized to a young Lynde Rosario for missing her in that audience. After that, no one could talk to me. I was completely insufferable. Peter Pan had wrote to me personally. I kept that fairy dust in a vial for years. And I was a theater kid for the rest of my life. There was that moment where I was like, this fictional character wrote me a letter after I watched them fly. Impossible. How could it be? It was that aha moment, that surprise, that, oh my gosh, this is actually happening. It's real. It's not made up. It's real. There have been so many plays as an adult that have still brought that up in me, that how it's real moment. And the suspension of disbelief, those three words, just for me, they capture it and they don't. They just can't. It's too big. That suspension of disbelief. And I remember those words. I heard them all through college, all through all my theater making education. And it's one of my favorite things about life is that people have the ability to suspend disbelief.
Yep.
So that's my story.
That's a great story. Shout out Peter Pan. And it was Peter Pan. I mean, like, there was nothing to like, it really was Peter Pan who wrote you, like the real one. I love that story, and you got my mind going a bunch of different ways now. I think that willingness to go on the ride, that willingness, it's like people say paying attention. It's the part about this that I'm like, this is a dialogue. This is not, there's this video clip kind of going around of somebody asking the musician Wynton Marsalis, for jazz musicians, do you care more about is it about the player or the listener? And he says, it's always about the listener, but the player is the first listener. And it just reminds me though that it is a dialogue. And like the makers, I think, believe first. You're right, because what you got brought into was the world, right? And so like that actor as Peter Pan was writing you from that world as Peter Pan. How would this person in this world that I've been invited to inhabit address this person who was also in this world in the audience and was engaging with you on that level? And that to me is like the beautiful thing, that we're all going to agree to go together to this other world. And we're going to do it at the same time. You're also making me think of, and this is kind of one of my other loves, I'm going to sneak in a 6 just because I think that I'm special. So one of my loves, obviously, I'm the in addition to being a Libra and beaming in from Colorado, I'm also the artistic director of Seattle Children's Theater, and TYA, Theater for Young Audiences, has been something very important to me and something I've been involved with as a playwright. I was an artistic director at Stage One Family Theater in Louisville for a couple of years, and then now Stage One or I'm sorry, now Seattle Children's Theater. And what you reminded me of in your story is, I think the reason I love, and let me also say that I think TY is actually, it's multi-generational, because kids don't go to the theater by themselves, and like some adult is taking them, but also there's plenty of, like, we get all sorts of people coming to the shows, you know what I mean, depending on the title, right? So I think it's really truly theater for everyone, right? But the thing I love about young audiences in particular is they are the trust, like if you're doing your job right, like the level of belief that they will willingly hand over is so sort of unfiltered and uncut and honest. And they're just ready, like they are ready, they got their hands on the on the railings, and they're like, let's go on this roller coaster. And I just think that is like just such a gift if you're a theater maker. It's like something, like they're honoring you by giving you that, and it's like a huge responsibility um to honor their attention they're giving you, and but more than their attention, right, like their willingness to participate, right? um so yeah, I share in that love for sure.
I find that young audiences tend to be the most honest audiences. They're the ones who are like, if I didn't buy it, I don't buy it.
But here's what's beautiful about them, right? They come ready to buy it.
Yeah.
There is no cynicism. Maybe like when you get in like 12 and up sometimes. But this is babies, it's play for babies, but when you're talking about like third, fourth, fifth grade, like they're like, let's go, what are we doing, let's get it. And then if it lets them down, then it's like, well, you messed up the dismount, like you got to start over. But they come ready to have a good time. They're ready, they come in the door ready, no one, and that's a big responsibility. Like, and it's a gift. Yeah.
It is, yeah, 100%. The people who come ready. I mean, like for me, I grew up to be one of those people. Like I started as a child seeing theater with adults bringing me, and then as an adult decided to bring myself and find the other humans who decided to do the same thing. And so I guess, yeah, it was so easy for me to decide what my number one thing that I love about theater and making theater and being part of theater is. And that to me is always collaboration. I have always introduced myself as a professional collaborator, as someone who comes to all things, because to me, collaboration is ephemeral. It's hyper-specific. Only these humans in this room at this time could make this thing as it is. Any other set of humans, you replace one element, it is drastically different. It is not the same thing. It is not going to look the same. And just yesterday, I believe we had a conversation about a vibe, right? That vibe is so important. It is sacred. The vibe you create with your collaborators within the making of a collaboration, for me, feels precious. It is that thing to be protected, to be honored. And when you see it, when you feel it, you want to hold on to it and take care of it so it doesn't dissolve, so it doesn't go away. But the nature of theater is that the next one will dissolve the current one, and so on and so forth. And so again, like every time you see anything happening, it is only happening in that moment. Any other moment, it would be a different thing.
And that's like the thing about the humble piece for me, right? It's like this run will end. You can only extend so many times. Like, and even when a show, like a Hamilton or something like that, it's still not the same as the first, as the one that started it all, right? Like, so all those other touring ones they're all a little bit different. And the timing, right? Like the moment of Hamilton versus the industry of, is it's the same, but it's very different. And yeah, that's like, I was having a conversation with somebody recently about they saw the black death of a black salesman, and he was just going on and on about it. He was like, because he's like a fan of the play, right? And he was just like, it just, just black people in it just made that play new for him again. And while I have my own opinions about that, I was like, that's dope though. Like, that's what's so cool about it, is that like the nature of the collaboration, the time when it's done, what happened in the zeitgeist, last week, it affects the experience. Like, so the play is always, here it is, the play is always the same, but the people, we change, society change, humans change. And so the play means something else, but the object's still the same words on the same, and that's what's so fly about it. And I talk about the glacial pace of theater all the time, but actually, the frequency at which all sorts of different kinds of plays are happening at multiple levels all the time across the country, that you can go see a Hamlet or a Rocky Horror Picture Show, or a group of students doing the Wolves, or a church group doing For Color Girls, or like, it's all happening in the month of April, and it's actually a lot more frequent than it may seem. I think for those in it, it seems like everything was so slow, but if you think about just the frequency at which, like, we can grab a play and say, we're doing this, and you know what, we're going to do it again in 5 years. So, but this time Lindy's going to play Peter Pan, or whoever. Is that a thing? Do you act at all, Lindy? No, never. No aspirations.
With all of those multi-hyphenate collaborators of mine, I live a very singular life in dramaturgy, but actually I find dramaturgy to be so expansive and fluid that it's never actually felt limiting in any way.
Sure. Yeah. It's because, would you say it's like, it's the process of, for you, is it like the play itself, the text itself, or is it the playwright and what their, or director, and like what their particular take on the text is?
Oh, I think it's all of those things. I actually very often will tell people I don't work with plays, I work with playwrights. And that's, like one does not exist in my life without the other. And so, because I very much only work with new work at this point in my career. And so most of the plays have a living playwright attached to them, someone I can talk to, someone who can talk to me, ask questions, have collaboration around a piece. And because of my new work at the Playwrights Center, the sea of music stands that we live in here is just a beautiful way, again, to sort of live in that moment of collaboration and process without any pressure of product, without any sense of we must make our ticket sales or anything like that. You're an artistic leader who works in a producing house. So that's something that for me has always felt like a real gift, to just live in process for however long it needs to. And for me, the development timeline is so individual to each artist that to put a schedule on it that seems all encompassing does not feel conducive to creating theater in my
Wait, am I supposed to be tracking ticket sales? Damn.
I hope not.
Maybe that's why everybody's mad at me.
I hope that's not
track ticket sales.
I'm sorry I had to give you just another task on your endless to-do list, Idris.
Oh my goodness. Well, so wait, you've exhausted your 5. You said your number 1 is collaboration.
It sure is. That is my number 1.
Okay.
Did you have, I know you didn't put them in any order, but if you had
I had 2 more because I snuck a couple in, but
please,
I'm gonna go with one. No,
say them both. Do it.
No,
We
no,
were-
no, I'm good. No, 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 we're good. We're caught up actually, because this is my, okay, yeah. So it's this one, and this is good because like you deviate into a little story. So this is all tied together. So I wanted to mix it up, right? So I wanted to be like, oh, this is like, the philosophical, but I also wanted like some pronouns in there too. I wanted to be like this particular play or the stage reading, right? So uh what I love about theater is the show Passing Strange. And it's for two reasons. One is not necessarily personal, it's just sort of I love that that show exists in terms of how it's structured, in terms of how it sounds and the genesis of it, that it started as like a band with narrative songs who was doing performances at Joe's Pub, and then a lot of smart dramaturgs like yourself got involved and helped turn that into a piece of theater, a piece of musical theater, whatever. But the band remains, it's still connected to its roots. They didn't sort of say, okay, we're gonna like adapt this and it's gonna be like a living room, and you know what I mean? Like they maintain that. And because of that, it doesn't sound like other musicals. There's like there's like a way a lot of musicals sound. Apparently there's like one college all the musical writers are going to. Respectfully, I'm just kidding, I'm joking. um uh Now on a personal level, why that show is important to me is because I had just left Chicago. I was in Chicago for 11 years. For 7 of those 11 years, I was running a very small, scrappy, grassroots ensemble-based theater company called Hermit Arts that I founded with a group of friends of mine from college and just from the sort of scrappy Chicago art scene. And then I left Chicago and was trying to figure out, okay, what kind of theater maker am I going to be now? I don't have this group anymore, and I was trying to like figure it out, and I got a little frustrated and I quit. I was just like, I'm done with plays, because I'm a hyphenate person too. So I was like, I have an interest in film and video. I was like way more into like making hip hop music at the time, and teaching and doing spoken word. So I was like, I'm good on that. And then I saw Passing Strange, and I saw the video of it. It was the Spike Lee um, recording that he did when it was in its final weekend or whatever. And I just like was just sort of arrested by like, oh, it just showed me some other way. Like this is like another way. And um then I wrote this play, How We Got On, which sort of set off a whole different trajectory for my life as like a theater maker, and where I started getting taken seriously as a as a playwright. And so I just love that show because of it's a reminder, and I think this is the moment we're in right now, that like it's just like innovation, how necessary innovation is. I haven't had a chance to see Strange Loop yet, but I love that. From what I hear about that show, like I just love that show, like I love, like we just need these kinds of new things that are innovative and yet personal, and that are of course engaging with the past and are sort of in a legacy. Like nothing's truly new under the sun, but the way you put them together, like the intersections that you park at, like, okay, I'm going to be at the intersection of this, of professional wrestling and, identity politics and globalization, and we'll get chat deity, right? And then it's like, okay, I'm going to do professional wrestling and, communism and like, so I think I just love that preservation, innovation sort of nexus, explosion that is always, there's always potential for, because of its collaborative nature. I remember when I finally learned that a lot of those plays I read in English class that had stage directions in them were notes, were like staging notes from the stage manager. So the stage manager would be like, oh, this is what we did when we produced it. And when we did Our Town, the Our Town premiere in 1930, whatever, and they just published that. And so they're like, puts the glass over here, and I was like, oh, that's how you're supposed to do a play. It says right here in the captions, and there's a list of all the props from the show. And it's like, no, that was a manifest from one voyage, but you don't have to do it that way. You can feel free to ignore these things. That's the other thing. I'll just throw this out a little honorable mention to the unsung hero of theater, which is the stage direction. Shout out stage directions, the humblest of humble forms, the easily ignored. Yet, there's so much possibility. Shout out Sarah Rule and Paula Vogel for encouraging a whole generation of playwrights to write tidal waves, washing cast off of sets and stuff like that.
Yeah, what's the most famous exit pursued by a bear? Enter Joshua on the back of an eagle. Oh yeah. Love a stage direction. Who doesn't? That's great.
Well,
it's a challenge. I also think like there's those stage directions that feel like, oh, this was someone's vision. And then there are stage directions that feels like this was someone's challenge to the next artist.
Yeah. So it's a fine line. That's why I'm saying they're misunderstood. But who really doesn't love stage directions? It's like modernist directors. Didn't like all the modernists, all the people who got me in the game were like, just cut all this crap. It's just all dialogue. And I was like, okay. And then once I got into the machinery, it was just like, what's happening? Where are they? I don't know what's going on. I'm like, but Sven told me not to put any stage directions. Yeah, it's always a guy named Sven.
I mean,
So
learning is unlearning, right? Like learning is always unlearning.
That's true. Learning is always unlearning. Real spill. Well, that's it. That's a great list, Lynde. That's a great list,
Idris. Yeah, that's fantastic. And add as many more as you want as we go along. I will remind our attendees that we have a Q&A button. And so if you just click that button at the bottom of your Zoom window, the lovely Julia Brown will be able to share your questions directly with us. I will read aloud what she shares, and we will just sort of address them together. How about that, Idris?
Rock and roll. There's some questions in the chat here though too.
Yeah. I'm gonna the ones that Julia picked. I know Julia does such a good job of streaming them for us, so that you don't have to sort of scroll up and down.
I see nothing.
I'm gonna say them. You don't have to see anything. I'm gonna say them out loud right now. We already have one. Great. This one is: how do you connect with what inspires you, and how do you connect back to those things when you're stuck?
How do you connect with those things that inspire you? And how do you reconnect when you're stuck?
Yeah.
I like this question a lot. I think, so there's this great, so Rick Rubin, the famous producer, brought us some great Johnny Cash albums, Run DMC, the like. He wrote this book about creativity, and so I saw this clip of him talking about, that thing where you're like, you have an idea, and then like 6 weeks later, you find somebody else is doing it, and you're like mad about it, or you feel like they stole it or whatever, depending on your level of paranoia, right? But really what that's about is like, you weren't the only person that was shown, but someone was in a place where they could grab it and plan it. And sometimes we're shown these things and we're just not ready for them yet. We're not ready to grab them yet. So in terms of how do I engage with things that inspire me, it's like, I'm constantly inspired, or whatever the opposite of, or just disgusted to the point of action. Um, yeah, I take it and I literally just write it out. Like just that act of honoring that thing by writing it down, um, is a big deal. It's a big step. And then your inspirations will usually mutate into a question and a pursuit. And then you start, and then you go on a journey. Um, and it may become a play or a song, or it may be something you just let go of and don't do anything with. But um, I think it's to see that thing and to bring it into your house, to let it in out of the coals and give it a seat by the fire and ask it questions. In terms of like being stuck, yeah, I don't know about that one. I'm at a place in my career. I'm like really on my like it's all a flow and so I don't believe in stuck. I just don't. I just think you're only stuck if you allow yourself to be stuck. You know what I'm saying?
I
Because
do.
sometimes it's exhaustion, or you're just hungry, or you're annoyed, or you're wearing the wrong shoes or whatever. Like, but or you're not sure and you're not confident. Um, or you just don't know what choice to make, but that doesn't mean you're necessarily stuck. It just means you're at a fork, and you gotta make a decision, and that's the gig. That's the job. You gotta make a decision. And you might not feel good about it, but you gotta make one. Or else nobody gets to have any birthday cake.
Everyone wants birthday cake. No, I think that's great. And yeah, I really resonate with that sort of understanding of not a vision that is only held by one, but that may be part of a larger zeitgeist. And you don't know how your idea got into someone else's head other than the universe is putting it into many heads, and who has, yeah, to your point, the ability to grab it in that moment.
I'll say this years ago. This just happened to me years ago, and I have witnesses. I was going to write this play of Huck Finn from Jim's perspective. And my wife was just on me constantly about it. But I had started reading Huck Finn again, and I was like, I can't go here. It's like too many N-words flying around. It's like, what I mean? I'm like, I'm not feeling this right now. And flash forward maybe about a month or two ago, Percival Everett got this obscene amount of money. Shout out Percival Everett, to write a novel of Huck Finn from Jim's perspective. And my wife was like, "You could have," and I was like, I threw it back. I caught this fish. I didn't want to scale it and got it and saute it in a pan with butter and lemons. I threw it back. I was like, I don't want to go through all that. No fish guts for me today. I took a picture with it, but I I let Percival get that one. And he's going to do a better job probably than he did as a play.
What a great story. Yeah, no, I love
Wow.
that story. That is wild. And yeah, you look back, and it's something, to me, stuck is also about forgetting how you got there, right? Like for me, moving stuck is really about figuring out what's keeping you from moving forward. And so I think, to your point, asking questions, or like recognizing that maybe I just don't want to. Maybe that's a real good reason just to put that away and move forward. But yeah, that's great. Thank you for sharing that. See, we have a couple more questions here from Asher. Asher asks, do either of you have any favorite recent theatrical suspension of disbelief experiences? Great question. Idris, can you think of anything recent? I mean, I had a childhood one. I can think more recently.
This is not that recent, but it's one I come back to all the time. And also, like, unfortunately, it's like that movie, The Prestige, where they're like watching each other's magic acts. Like, it's harder for me, unfortunately, because I I just know how it, like, I appreciate it. Like, I appreciate the crowd, and I am a great audience member, especially for theater. I sit up close, I laugh, I give it up, I do my job. But the example I talk about all the time is, and this was actually a big teaching moment for me, or a learning moment for me. It was when I saw Cirque du Soleil. I was down in Orlando where my parents live, and they took me and my wife Felicia to see Cirque du Soleil. And, they got the trapeze artists, they got, all the stuff. And the sort of clown element of it was this like lunch lady kind of character. And it was kind of like they were doing like kind of a Frog Prince kind of thing. And the frog was represented by just this little beam of light. And it would move, and they'd have rivet sounds. And there's this little pantomime, and she accidentally steps on frog, and the whole audience gasps. They put so much into that little beam of light. I mean, it's just a woman stepping on a beam of light, but we were like, right? And that moment was just like taught me a lot about humans, and like what we project, just how we project, and how just, again, our willingness to put it together. Oh, okay, that's supposed to be, okay, got it. Okay, I get it. I'm in on it. Like, we want to be in on it. It's like, okay, got it. That's the frog, and I got it. That's my favorite moment. Like, seriously, it's like, yeah.
Oh,
Has
that
not
just
been
made
topped
me-
yet. Has not
Yeah,
been topped
yeah,
yet.
that sounds incredible. But even just that, right? Everyone knows what it is, but we
Yeah.
have all collectively agreed it is something else. And the moment
Yes.
you do something to that belief, there's instant response. I had worked on a devising piece, so I knew how it was built. You're right. Like, when you build it, what's going to happen. And there was one performance of it where this particular actress was it was like I was seeing her for the first time. And I had watched her rehearse it. I knew exactly what was happening. And she showed us a long piece of fabric that got constructed into a bundle that looked like a baby. And she dropped it. Everyone, including myself, who knew that was just a bundle of fabric.
Yeah.
We all
But it's
grabbed
not
each
just a
other.
bundle.
It was
It's
just
not.
that moment where you're
It's-
like, no, not the baby.
in the world that we've all agreed that we're gonna participate in, it's a baby.
Yeah.
And you were grieving the baby in the world that you signed on for. It's like when you play a video game, it's it's like, oh, I died, so yeah. I love that. I love it. It's like, it's great.
Totally. We have a question from Thomas. Thomas asks, the stage reading was mentioned. What happens when you can't find a group or a number of people who will participate and provide true feedback?
I don't know that I understand what true feedback is.
Well, let's start with the first part. What do you do when you can't find a group of people?
Why can't you find a group of people?
Maybe you don't live in a place that's very populated. I have to say that the folks that have shied away from sort of this technology, this like, hey, we don't need to live in the same place to do something together, have had less success or greater challenges, I should say, in sort of that like connecting with folks who may be like-minded, who might not be geographically located right by you. And I understand how incredibly valuable it is to share space, especially after being denied the ability to share space for however long it was for us who live alone in the pandemic to like really feel comfortable doing that again. And I have to say that I found an incredible amount of connection by just reaching out and saying, can we all just get in a Zoom room?
Yeah.
Hey, I'm doing this thing. And if everyone's around when I'm doing this thing and you are interested in these types of things, check it out. Come join me. Stay on camera. Like, let's have a conversation. And maybe it's not exactly as you want it to be, but I have often found extreme success in sort of taking out the way you think it's going to be, or like it should be like this, or it should feel or look a certain way, and open your mind a little more to how many different ways can this go? How wide can my net be thrown? You know, that sort of expansive thinking.
And my sort of responses to the piece of the question, I wasn't trying to be flippant. I was really like asking in a way of like, I mean, you must, like, it's a how bad do you want it thing. Like, you must make it so. You must go after it. You must find the writers group. We live in marvelous times. You have to go after it. If you want to do this, if you want to write in this form, you gotta have folks, yo. You gotta have people, and you gotta Malcolm X it. It's like, by any means necessary. Like, you gotta do it. You gotta do it. Go to the community. I often do this thing of I do the, like, I think back to times where I was living in certain places where I didn't have a community, right? And I was thinking about like what I would do now if I knew what I knew then. And one of the things I would have done is I would have gone to every high school that had a drama club or a drama program, and been like, hey, I'm a playwright in your community. And I want to know, like, would you be interested in me working with your students? I have a play I want to work. You know what I'm saying? Like, you got to humble yourself and go after it. Like, I need this. And I need to hear my words said, and I need to know what you felt in order for me to know what I got. Or it is the Zoom thing. I mean, one of the things I actually like about Facebook is there is an affinity group for everything. My son, we've discovered, my youngest son is a sensory seeker. He has sensory processing challenges. There's a sensory processing parents group on Facebook. As I've been living in two places, trying to do this Seattle, Colorado thing until we can fully move. And as a way to try to get to know the community more, I'm on like 4 different like Seattle theater artists like groups, and so you just got to go after it. You got to go after it.
Thank you. I completely agree with that. And I think there is sort of that self-motivation that really comes into play here. So I really appreciate you naming that. We have a few more minutes left, and I see we have another question come up. This question: how do you approach writing about life experiences or cultural contexts that are different from your own in a responsible way? As the playwright in the room, Idris, I would love to hear your thoughts.
Well, y'all,
writing responsibly.
I don't know. There's no formula. You'll know it when I mean, I think characters, there's this thing around like character versus a characteristic, right? Or an attribute. And I think in our desire to increase representation, which is very necessary, we've sort of overemphasized cultural identity as a characteristic or an attribute, right? Like, who your parents were and who their parents were is that's not a characteristic. That's DNA stuff. Who you are is who you are, and who you are is what you do or what you don't do, or or what you want or what you don't want, like, that's who you are. And so for me, I start with, is this a character in pursuit or resistance? And all that other stuff kind of falls into place. I mean, obviously, I think people should write from the well of what they know or what they're willing to learn. I think you have to kind of immerse yourself, but also I think you got to go for it and have a little courage and be willing to say, I think I got that wrong. I mean, I wrote a really big play that was about westward expansion. And I'm writing about people in the 1850s, different sort of indigenous communities, Mexican expats, you know, Black Mormons, you know, and I did a lot of research, and shout out the very wise dramaturg Laura Breckner, who helped me sift through all that material, and shout out the wonderful director Maya Dralis, who also helped me, and everybody at Oregon Shakespeare during that time who helped me. But I gotta tell you, like, I was uncomfortable. I'm still uncomfortable with what I've tried to bite off in that. And I don't know that I would do something like that again. I felt that the responsibility was too big. It was too big. And I just know there's no way I'm good. As stylized as it was, and don't get me wrong, like, you know, it's a beautiful, you know, I do this for real. But so I just think it's a touch and go thing. It's a trial and error thing. You know, someone will always inevitably think you got it wrong, and sometimes you should honor that and make adjustments, and sometimes you got to just stick to your guns and be like, I feel you, but that's not my experience of this. And you know, other folks have had a different experience with it, and it just is what it is. You know, and listen, I'm not Muslim, I've written Muslim characters, I've written Black Muslim characters, so I know the Black part, and I've had to kind of learn the other part, but I've had to learn the experience of being a Black Muslim, meaning like I'm not trying to speak for all, you know, people of that enormous faith tradition, of which there are billions of people. So I think, but I think that's the gig. I mean, the gig is human experience, and no one wants. I mean, like if you're just writing, this is another play about a bald-headed 45-year-old who likes hip hop too much. Yet another one. Nobody want to call it. So
That's so
yeah.
important. Yeah. And you talked earlier about the necessity of representation. And I think that so many new plays create pathways for representation, and even the act of creating something that is diverse or not part of your lived experience is always sort of an act of humility as well, and everything we talked about earlier around shared understanding, learning, perspective. These are all things that I think many artists sort of bring into their process in a way to create authenticity, but also understanding. So thank you, Idris. I see we are just coming up at the end of our time. Are there sort of any final words for our attendees, Idris? Love of theater, anything you want to share before we say goodbye to our audience this evening?
Is there anything I want to share, or is there
Of
anything
course.
they want to share? No. I thought I was asking for clarity. Were you asking them if they
I
had
am
anything else to share?
asking you if there is
That's
anything
fine.
you want to leave these folks with as sort of parting words around the love of theater, how you love theater, your inspirations, anything at all.
Just I want to thank everybody for you know, choosing to gift us time on this, and I assume that everybody here has been reflecting in their own way about this practice. And you know, we lost a lot of people in the field, and we're losing theaters weekly, theater venues, but this thing is going to live, if we continue to show up for it. I mean, that's like we are theater. So you know, there's a lot of clickbait articles weekly about the death knell, and it's like, I'm not dead, you're not dead, these 40 something people here are not dead, and all of us are the theater. So it's like at the beginning of Mos Def's Black on Both Sides album, he's like, you know, he talks about like people, I say, what's up with hip hop, you know, what's going on with hip hop, where's hip hop going? And he goes, you know, hip hop is what, you know, it's us. It's like if we're thugged out, hip hop's gonna be thugged out. If we're smoked out, hip hop's gonna be smoked out, you know. So so I take a lot of empowerment from that idea.
Thank you. Thank you, Idris. And yes, thank you to everyone who attended. We all are theater. Thank you again. And Julia, do we know if this will be transcribed? I believe it will be.
Yes,
and
it
available
will.
later. Thank you.
I'm so glad to know that my bad Mos Def impression is going to be just transcribed for history and future generations to enjoy. That is one of the great thrills of my career.
Thank you. Thank you, Idris. Thank
Thank
you,
you.
everyone, for joining this Artists in Conversation. And we hope to see you again soon, maybe next month at Playlabs. Thanks, everybody. Have a good night.